If you're a dedicated follower of tech innovation, you no doubt recall the day in 2010 when Apple CEO Steve Jobs unveiled Apple's new tablet computer, the iPad. Internet jokers and wacky morning DJs had a lot of fun with the name. Apple, as usual, had the last laugh. The iPad has since evolved into an unqualified success, carving out a space between laptop and smartphone, and providing a handy device for checking email, surfing the web, reading ebooks, and, most importantly, perhaps, enabling the 21st century obsession known as binge watching. So today, let's learn about the history of Apple's iPad lines. On January 27, 2010, Steve Jobs took the stage at a special Apple event and took out a tablet out of an envelope. This was the first Apple iPad. Designed by the team of Johnny Ive, the iPad was a giant step in creating a third category of device, something between a laptop and a smartphone. However, skeptics criticized Apple. Some even called the iPad a big iPod Touch, others predicted it would fail miserably. But Apple proved the entire industry and the critics wrong. Apple iPad, 2010. Announced in January 2010, the original iPad offered an aluminum build with square edges, much like what we see on the current iPad Pro, though the new models are much slimmer. It came with a 9.7-inch display, measured around 13mm thick and weighed around 680g. Pricing started at $499 and there were accessories including a keyboard docking station, as well as a standard docking station to turn the iPad into a great photo frame. Apple iPad 2, 2011. The second generation of iPad was unveiled a year after the first. It also had a new dual-core A5 chip, which was said to perform at twice the speed of the original, with 9x faster graphics, and a repositioned speaker. The biggest difference with the iPad 2 compared to the original model though, cameras. It had a front camera and a back camera, allowing for FaceTime and video calling. While that's pretty standard now, it was big news at the time. Apple iPad 3, 2011. The third generation iPad arrived in 2012, but while the design remained largely the same as its predecessor, the screen technology vastly improved. Apple called it a Retina display, a phrase it continues to use now, and it offered 4x the pixels of the iPad 2, as well as greater color saturation. Apple iPad 4, late 2012. Only 6 months after the launch of the iPad 3, Apple announced the iPad 4. It was pretty much the same as the iPad 3, meaning the same 9.7-inch Retina display, a metal build that measured 241.2 by 185.7 by 9.4mm and weighed 652g, but this is the iPad that ditched the 30-pin dock connector and introduced Lightning. Apple iPad Mini, 2012. Apple launched the first iPad Mini alongside the iPad 4, marking new territory for iPad. Retaining a premium metal build, the iPad Mini was significantly smaller and lighter than the standard iPad, so half the weight. The iPad Mini had curvier, rounded edges than the original iPad. It also used the A5 processor, meaning it wasn't quite as powerful as the iPad 4. That said, it might have been mini by nature, but it was mighty in what it offered. Apple iPad Air, 2013. The fifth generation of Apple iPad was called the iPad Air and it came with a whole new design, borrowing the curved edges from the iPad Mini. The 9.7-inch display was the same as the iPad 4, but a larger viewing area. The same cameras as the iPad 4 were on board the iPad Air, but Apple put a new A7 chip under the hood of the Air. Apple iPad Mini 2, 2013. 1 year after the iPad Mini launched, Apple introduced the iPad Mini with Retina display. The design remained the same. Storage options included a 128GB option, and Apple also upgraded the chip to A7, which was the same processor found on the iPad Air and iPhone 5s. Apple iPad Air 2, 2014. The second generation of iPad Air offered a similar design to the original Air model, but it slimmed down even further to 6.1mm, giving it the title of the slimmest tablet you could get at the time. It was also lighter than the first generation Air. The biggest change between the Air and the Air 2 was the introduction of Touch ID. Apple iPad Mini 3, 2014. The iPad Mini 3 arrived alongside the iPad Air 2, but at the time, Apple glossed over it quickly in the presentation, focusing on the larger model instead. The design remained the same as the iPad Mini 2, though Apple did add Touch ID to the iPad Mini 3 and made it available in gold. There was no processor upgrade though, no camera improvements, and it didn't get the laminated and anti-reflective display or faster Wi-Fi that the larger iPad Air 2 did. Ultimately, the iPad Mini 3 was a minor upgrade to the iPad Mini range. Apple iPad Mini 4, 2015. The Apple iPad Mini 4 succeeded the iPad Mini 3 in 2015, though no one knew back then that it would be the last Mini for a while. It was slimmer and lighter than the iPad Mini 3, and it got a fully laminated display, as well as an anti-reflective coating like the Air 2. Apple also upgraded the chip in the iPad Mini 4 to the A8 processor with M8 Motion coprocessor, and it got a bump in resolution of the rear camera too. Other than that, the design remained the same as the previous iPad Minis. Apple iPad Pro 12.9, 2015. The original Apple iPad Pro launched in 2015, again marking new territory for the iPad. Offering a massive 12.9-inch display with a total of 5.6 million pixels and a variable refresh rate to help save power, the iPad Pro was a monster of a tablet. The first Apple stylus was also introduced alongside the iPad Pro called the Apple Pencil. It could be charged directly from the iPad Pro's Lightning port. Apple iPad Pro 9.7, 2016. The 9.7-inch device, called the iPad Pro 9.7, was a smaller model than the 12.9-inch model that was launched the previous year. It offered the same slim aluminum build and the Touch ID fingerprint sensor, but it came with a new color option, rose gold. It had the same power as the larger 12.9 Model 2, making it considerably more powerful than the Air 2 it replaced. Apple iPad, 2017. This Apple iPad model was quietly announced in March 2017, sitting above the iPad Mini 4, but below the iPad Pro range. Essentially, it was the model that replaced the iPad Air 2, but Apple dropped the Air name. It had the same design as the iPad Air 2, albeit a little thicker, but that was down to this model lacking a laminated anti-reflective display. Apple iPad Pro 10.5, 2017. The Apple iPad Pro 10.5 arrived at WWDC in 2017, alongside a spec update to the Apple iPad Pro 12.9. The iPad Pro 10.5 was designed to replace 2016's 9.7-inch iPad Pro model, offering a 20% larger display and a 40% reduction in bezels. Apple iPad Pro 12.9, 2017. Unlike the Apple iPad Pro 10.5, the updated iPad Pro 12.9 didn't see a new design. Its bezels remained the same, as did its overall design and display size, which came as a bit of a disappointment. The iPad Pro 12.9-inch update only saw internal upgrades though. Apple iPad, 2018. The 2018 standard iPad was designed as a successor to the 2017 model, offering the same design as the iPad Air 2. Once again, it missed off a fully laminated display and anti-reflective coating, but it added support for the first-generation Apple Pencil compared to the 2017 model. It missed out on a number of the iPad Pro features, including the Smart Connector and True Tone display technology, as well as no rose gold color option, but it was significantly cheaper than the Pro models, aimed at students. Apple iPad Pro 11, 2018. The Apple iPad Pro 11 arrived in 2018, but it was designed to sit alongside the iPad Pro 10.5 model rather than replace it. Offering a complete design refresh, the iPad Pro 11 squared off its edges, reduced its bezels and ditched Touch ID in favor of Face ID. It also swapped Lightning for USB Type-C. It was also quite a bit more powerful than the 10.5-inch Pro model, featuring the A12X Bionic processor, along with the option of a 1TB model and improved cameras. Apple iPad Pro 12.9, 2018. Unlike the first update to the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, the second update announced in 2018 made some big changes. It not only made some huge reductions to the footprint despite offering the same screen size, but it squared off the edges too, like the iPad Pro 11. The 2018 iPad Pro 12.9 also reduced its weight by 44 g, Face ID replaced Touch ID, Lightning was replaced by USB Type-C, and the second generation of Apple Pencil meant the stylus could attach magnetically to the edge of the iPad Pro 12.9 and charge wirelessly. Apple iPad Air, 2019. The 2019 Apple iPad Air was much like the iPad Pro, only without Face ID, uniform bezels, and the Type-C port. Instead, it opted for Lightning and Touch ID. The 10.5-inch Retina display had a 1668 by 2224 resolution and featured an anti-reflective coating and true tone, marking a jump up from the standard 2018 iPad. iPad Mini, 2019. The Apple iPad Mini 5, not an official title, arrived 4 years after the previous iPad Mini update. The design remained the same, again, but despite the now pretty large bezels for its time, it continues to be a very compact tablet. The 2019 iPad Mini retains the device's most recognizable features, the 7.9-inch screen size alongside the Touch ID home button. Apple iPad, 2019. The 10.2-inch iPad Apple released in 2019 replaced the 9.7-inch iPad from 2018. It was designed to make the most of Apple's then new iPad OS operating system while still being the company's most affordable and familiar tablet option. Apple iPad Pro 12.9-inch, 2020. In 2020, the Apple iPad Pro 12.9 got a slight makeover with the addition of a new processor, improved camera, and all the usual goodness users would expect from the Pro lineup. This model also added a LiDAR sensor, which can now be found on the latest iPhones. Whilst the upgraded processor, improved cameras, and addition of the LiDAR sensor were great though, the 2020 iPad Pro didn't break much other new ground. Apple iPad, 8th Gen. The 8th generation Apple iPad was the more affordable iPad released in 2020. It was the classic iPad with the same styling as the previous generation. So much so in fact, that all that really changed was the updated processor. Apple iPad Air, 2020. The Apple iPad Air released in 2020 was more affordable than the Pro but still delivered some nice features including Touch ID, though moved to the power button in this model, the A14 Bionic chip, True Tone display, and more besides. It was launched in 5 color options, the first time this had happened, and it featured a flat edge with a magnetic area for charging the second generation Apple Pencil. Apple iPad, 2021. The latest standard tablet from Apple's labs, the iPad 10.2 inches, 9th Gen, 2021, is very much an iterative update, but it's undeniably a welcome one and maintains its position as the best value iPad out there. Physically, it's identical to the 8th Gen model from 2020, with the same design, dimensions, and 10.2 inches IPS touch display. Apple iPad 12.9 inch, 2021. The latest Apple 12.9 inches iPad Pro, 2021, is the closest an iPad has ever come to being a serious laptop than ever before. It carries the same powerful M1 processor as Apple's current MacBook Air and MacBook Pro laptops, and it costs as much as well. In some ways, however, it's a superior piece of hardware, especially when it comes to the display. Apple iPad Mini, 2021. Despite its popularity, the iPad Mini hasn't enjoyed updates with as much regularity as Apple's other tablets in recent times. With the 2021 model, however, Apple has given its smallest iPad a big overhaul, lavishing it with a completely new design, new internals, and a whole load of new features. iPad were born with the purpose of serving the maximum needs of people, bringing many benefits in life, work, study, and entertainment. Do you find the iPad useful? Leave a comment below to let me know. Like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.